They say some insults don't just sting, they relabel you in front of witnesses. The first thing I noticed when I stepped into the hotel ballroom wasn't the chandeliers or the champagne fountains. It was the smell. Perfume layered over polished marble and catered food, rich, artificial, thick enough it felt like money had learned how to breathe. The kind of air that tells you this room was built for people who've never sweated through a shirt, never bled for a living, never carried something real on their backs. I tugged at the collar of my best button down. Clean. Pressed. Still wrong like my whole life showed up wearing the wrong accent. Then her voice sliced through the crowd. Sharp, loud, confident. The stinky country boy is here. Laughter didn't explode. It fractured little bursts, then silence, then a few more people forcing it like they were afraid not laughing would cost them. My boots stopped mid-step. Heat crawled up my neck into my ears. My chest tightened so hard I had to remind myself how to inhale. I wasn't a boy. I was 65. I'd survived droughts that cracked our creek into broken clay, market crashes that took neighbors' land, a horse fall that never healed right, and the hardest thing of all, burying my wife with hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the shovel. I'd raised 2 kids, kept a Texas ranch alive with hands that never learned the softness of office work. But in that room, I was reduced to a joke. A smell. A stain. I turned toward the exit, and then a hand closed around mine, firm, steady, familiar. Christopher. He leaned in like we were sharing a secret. Dad, he whispered, voice calm as stone. Don't react. Tomorrow, everything changes. Before we go 1 inch further, tell me something real. Where are you listening from? And what time is it there right now? I didn't answer Christopher right away. I just stood there, my hand still wrapped in his, feeling the eyes in that ballroom crawl over my back like insects. Some people looked away out of embarrassment. Others stared openly curious, hungry, waiting to see whether the country boy would snap. I didn't. I nodded once. All right, I said quietly. One more night. Christopher's grip loosened not because he stopped caring, but because he'd been holding tension longer than I realized. We moved to the side of the room, close enough to the music that conversation turned into background noise. Amanda laughed again somewhere behind us. Too loud. Too practiced. The laugh of someone who believed the room belonged to her. I watched her then, not with anger, but with clarity. She wasn't celebrating love. She was celebrating control. Her hand stayed locked around Christopher's arm like a claim. Her eyes scanned the guests the way ranch buyers scan land, counting value, ranking importance, deciding what mattered and what didn't. And for the first time, something in my chest shifted. Not hurt. Recognition. Because I'd seen that look before on men who came sniffing around during drought years, waving checks and talking about opportunity. They never cared about the land. They cared about what it could become once someone else was pushed off it. That's when I understood something that scared me more than the insult itself. Amanda hadn't humiliated me by accident. She'd tested the room, and the room hadn't stopped her. If you've ever realized too late that someone wasn't laughing with you but measuring how easy you'd be to erase, stay with me. Because that night wasn't the end of my dignity. It was the last night they thought I was blind. I've learned something over 65 years of working land. When people start counting what you own, it's because they're already imagining life without you in it. My name is Cyrus Walker, and long before I ever stepped into that ballroom, I belonged to the dirt under my boots. Walker Ranch sits in the Texas Hill Country, where the mornings come quiet and honest, where hills roll slow like resting cattle, and the sun takes its time climbing because nothing out there needs to be rushed. The land's been in my family longer than anyone remembers without pulling out a Bible and a county deed book. It's cattle, yes, but it's vineyards too. Long, stubborn rows of grapes that end up poured into crystal glasses at weddings like the one I was standing in that night. Funny how life works like that. Your sweat becomes someone else's luxury. My father didn't give speeches when he handed me the ranch. He just said one sentence and walked away. Don't be the man who loses it. So I wasn't. Not when drought turned the creek into cracked clay. Not when banks circled like vultures. Not when developers showed up smiling, waving checks, telling me I could finally rest. I had a wife, Lila. She was the kind of woman who could turn a quiet house into a home with nothing but a skillet and a song. When she died 6 years ago, sudden, cruel, I remember thinking, if the world can take her that fast, it can take anything. I raised 2 kids on that land. My daughter, Harper, built her life elsewhere. Strong, independent, gone, but never lost. My son Christopher stayed close. And that bond? It wasn't built on words. It was built on early mornings, broken fences, and knowing without saying it that if one of us fell, the other grabbed the rope. If you've ever trusted someone because of the work you survived together, you'll understand why I didn't see the danger coming. Christopher introduced me to Amanda Winslow 2 months before the engagement. He insisted we have dinner somewhere nice. One of those steakhouses downtown where the lights are low, the menus don't list prices, and the waiter says "sir" like it's a credential you earned. Christopher wore a clean blazer. I wore what I always wore when I wanted to show respect. Pressed jeans, polished boots, and a collared shirt that had seen real work. Amanda arrived 10 minutes late. Not rushed, not apologetic. She walked in like the room had been waiting for her. Perfect hair, confident smile, a dress that probably cost more than my first pickup ever did. She hugged Christopher, kissed his cheek, then turned to me. "Mr. Walker," she said, offering a handshake so light it barely counted as touch. "It's so nice to finally meet you." It sounded practiced. At first I told myself I was being unfair. City people have different rhythms, different manners. Then the questions started. "So, how many acres do you own?" she asked, swirling her wine like she was tasting numbers. "Enough to keep me busy," I said. She laughed. "And the vineyards too? I hear land values out there are climbing fast, especially with development." Christopher smiled, proud, relaxed. He thought she was admiring his roots. Then she leaned in slightly. "Have you ever thought about estate planning?" she asked. "Property gets complicated. Trusts, wills, transfers." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. She never asked Christopher what he loved. Never asked what kind of man he wanted to be. Never asked anything that didn't come with numbers attached. That was the first time my gut spoke up, and I ignored it because love has a way of convincing good men to doubt the instincts that once kept them alive. A week later, I met Amanda's parents. They flew in from New York and treated Texas like a temporary inconvenience. Her father, Richard Winslow, walked into my house like a man inspecting a property he might renovate. His suit fit perfectly. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "So you're the ranch owner," he said, glancing around. Charming. Not warm, not respectful. Just dismissive. Amanda's mother was worse. "Oh, Cyrus," she said, wrinkling her nose as she looked at my kitchen. "How rustic." They didn't ask about my wife. Didn't ask about my kids. Didn't ask about the life that had been lived inside these walls. They asked about value, market price, mineral rights, what I planned to do if development came calling. Richard mentioned a highway expansion project almost casually, but his eyes sharpened when he said it, like a man testing whether a card had already been dealt. I noticed. After they left, I pulled Christopher aside. "Son," I said quietly, "they aren't looking at you. They're looking through you." He sighed, not angry, not dismissive, just patient. The way young men get when they think experience is another word for fear. "Dad, they're just different," he said. "Amanda loves me." I wanted to push harder. Wanted to tell him that love doesn't count acreage. But I didn't, because I'd already buried my wife. And the thought of losing my son, too, of becoming the father who couldn't accept the woman he chose, terrified me more than any drought ever had. So I stayed quiet. And in that silence, something dangerous found room to grow. Silence didn't fix anything. It just gave Amanda time. Over the next year, she became a regular presence in our lives. Polished, pleasant, careful. The kind of woman who knew exactly how much warmth to show without ever letting it become real. She visited the ranch twice. Both times, she dressed like she was headed to brunch, not a working property. Clean shoes, she didn't want touching dirt. Sunglasses she never took off, even when the sun dipped low. She smiled for pictures, posted them online with captions like "Texas charm" and "country life." Like our home was a costume. When we were alone, the questions came back. "Have you ever thought about downsizing, Cyrus? Would you consider putting the ranch into a trust? Christopher says you work so hard. Maybe it's time to think about retirement." Always framed as concern. Always aimed in the same direction. My daughter Harper noticed it too. One afternoon, she cornered me on the porch while Amanda was inside taking pictures of the vineyard. "Dad," she said, voice low, "she's not here for him." I exhaled slowly. "I know." "Then why are you letting this happen?" I didn't answer. Because love makes cowards out of men who should know better. Because I was afraid of being right and alone. Because I didn't want to be the villain in my son's love story. Amanda came back outside, smiling like nothing had happened, and I realized something too late. When a predator smiles, it isn't kindness. It's camouflage. If this is hitting close to home for you, if you've ever watched someone take advantage while hiding behind politeness, stay with me, because the worst part wasn't the insult. It was how carefully it had been planned. The engagement happened faster than it should have. Christopher proposed during a weekend trip to Napa. Amanda posted the ring from every angle imaginable, filters, captions, hashtags about forever. Her parents reacted like a deal had just closed. Dates were set, venues booked, guest lists expanded. Everything moved with momentum, like a train that had already decided it wasn't stopping. When Christopher called to tell me, his voice was hopeful, nervous, proud. "Dad," he said. She said yes. I congratulated him, meant it, or at least wanted to. But after we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my hands. The same hands that had built fences and buried a wife now felt useless against something dressed up as love. A few weeks later, Christopher asked me to attend the engagement party. "Front and center," he said. "I want you there." I tried to decline. Told him I'd be more comfortable staying back at the ranch. He didn't accept it. "You're my father," he said simply. "This is our family." So I went. The hotel ballroom was exactly what Amanda would have wanted: polished, expensive, designed to impress people who already expected to be impressed. The Winslows held court like royalty. Amanda laughed louder than she needed to. Her hand never left Christopher's arm. Her eyes scanned the room like she was already counting what belonged to her. And then she saw me. The boots. The posture shaped by wind and work. The reminder of a world she didn't respect. Her smile widened, and she said it loud enough for the room to hear. "The stinky country boy is here." That was the moment the illusion cracked, and the moment my son decided he was done playing along. I didn't react the way people expected. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't glare. Didn't fire back with something sharp enough to earn applause. I did the opposite. I set my glass down slow, deliberate, and turned toward the exit. Because dignity doesn't argue with disrespect. It leaves. I'd taken 3 steps when Christopher caught up to me. Not frantic. Not embarrassed. Steady. His hand closed around my forearm, grounding me the way it always had when storms rolled in faster than forecast. "Dad," he said quietly, leaning in so no one else could hear. "Don't leave." "I'm not staying," I replied, my voice tight but controlled. Not for that. He didn't defend her, didn't explain it away. Instead, he positioned himself slightly between me and the room, like a shield. "Just trust me," he said. "One more night." I searched his face, really looked. There was no panic there, no shame. There was certainty. "Tomorrow," he whispered, his mouth close to my ear, "everything changes." The words landed heavier than the insult. Tomorrow? I wanted answers. Demanded them, even. But the room felt like it was watching us, listening for weakness, waiting to see if the rancher would be dragged back in. I nodded once. "All right," I said. "One more night." Christopher exhaled. Relief, barely visible. As we moved away from the crowd, I felt something shift inside my chest. Not hope, exactly. Preparation. If you've ever trusted someone, not because you understood the plan, but because you understood them, stay with me. Because that night wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about timing. And tomorrow was already coming. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the hotel bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling while the city outside pretended nothing was wrong. Cars moved. Lights blinked. Somewhere, people laughed and toasted and talked about ordinary things. Meanwhile, my life felt like it was balanced on the edge of a blade. Amanda's words replayed on a loop: Stinky, country, tolerate. Not just the insult, but the confidence behind it. The certainty that nothing would happen to her for saying it. That was the part that kept me awake. Because confidence like that doesn't come from courage. It comes from believing you're protected. I thought about my wife, Lila. About the way she used to sit on the porch during storms, calm as could be, saying, "If something feels off, it's because it is." I whispered her name into the dark room. "I don't know what's coming," I said quietly, "but I feel like we're standing too close to something we can't see yet." At some point before dawn, I sat up and rubbed my face with both hands. They felt older than usual, stiffer, like they already knew work was coming. The phone buzzed just after sunrise. "Christopher." "Dad," he said, and the tone of his voice told me this wasn't a normal call. No small talk, no easing in. "Come to my apartment. Now, is everything all right? I asked. There was a pause, just long enough to mean something. You need to hear this in person, he said. And once you do, nothing's going to look the same. If you've ever felt that moment when you know the truth is finally about to show itself, stay with me. Because that call was the real beginning. Christopher's apartment didn't feel like his place that morning. It felt like a command center. Coffee cups sat untouched on the counter. A laptop glowed on the kitchen table, cables snaking out of it like veins. A younger man I didn't recognize sat there wearing headphones, posture straight, eyes focused. Christopher locked the door behind me. That's when my stomach dropped. Dad, he said, voice low but steady. This is Jordan. He's a sound engineer. I went to college with his brother. Jordan nodded once, didn't smile. The kind of man who understands when silence matters. What's going on? I asked. Christopher didn't answer right away. He pulled out a chair for me. Sit, he said. Please. I sat. My knees felt heavier than usual. For the last 3 weeks, Christopher said, I've been recording conversations, phone calls, meetings. Anytime Amanda or her father talked business when I was in the room, my mouth went dry. Recording? What kind of conversations? He met my eyes, didn't flinch. The kind you warned me about. He pressed play. Amanda's voice filled the room, clear, relaxed, amused. I'm not marrying him for love, she laughed. I'm marrying him for the land. The room tilted. My hands gripped the edge of the chair as if the floor might give out next. Christopher didn't stop it. He let it keep playing. Because some truths don't need mercy. They need to be heard all the way through. If you're listening right now and your chest just tightened, stay with me. Because what came next didn't just confirm my fears. It explained every smile, every question, every insult. And it changed the direction of everything that followed. Christopher didn't pause the recording. He didn't look away. He let it play like a storm passing through the room because stopping it wouldn't make it less real. Amanda's voice continued, casual and confident. 2 years, she said. That's all we need. Once the paperwork's done, his dad won't matter anymore. A man's voice followed. Older. Smooth. Calculated. Her father. The interstate expansion is already approved, he said. Once construction starts, the value jumps. 25 million, maybe more. We just need to control the timing. My ears rang. Interstate expansion. That explained the sudden interest. The estate questions. The urgency disguised as concern. The audio clicked to the next file. Amanda again, this time colder. Just keep Cyrus calm, she said. He trusts Christopher. Once we're married, everything gets easier. Something inside my chest fractured, not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet break where trust used to sit. Christopher finally stopped the recording. The silence afterward felt heavier than the words. I didn't want to believe it, he said quietly. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. That love doesn't lie like that. He swallowed. Then I remembered something you taught me. I looked at him. If someone keeps counting what you own, he said, it's because they're planning to take it. I nodded once. The ranch, my wife's life, our family's future, all of it reduced to numbers on someone else's spreadsheet. Christopher leaned back, eyes steady. They think they're in control, he said. That's the advantage. If you've ever realized the truth only hurts because it arrived late, stay with me. Because from that moment on, this stopped being about betrayal. It became about consequences. Christopher didn't raise his voice when he explained the plan. That's how I knew it was real. Men who act on impulse talk fast. Men who've already decided speak carefully. They think the wedding is the finish line, he said. That's what makes it perfect. He paced once, then stopped. The screen behind the altar, they believe it's for photos. Memories. A love story. He looked at me. It's locked to one input. Jordan handled that. Jordan nodded. No outside override. Once it starts, it finishes. I swallowed. And the law? Texas is one-party consent, Christopher said. I was present in every recording. An attorney reviewed everything weeks ago. The DA's office already knows what's coming. That word knows changed something in me. This wasn't revenge. It was preparation. What do you need from me? I asked. Christopher met my eyes. Just stand there, he said, and don't look away. If you've ever realized the safest move isn't fighting but waiting, you already understand what came next. I didn't go back to the hotel right away. I drove. No music, no destination. Just the road and the weight of everything I'd just heard pressing down on my chest. The ranch came into my mind without asking. Oak trees along the fence line, Vineyard rows catching early light, the porch where Lila used to sit with a glass of sweet tea and pretend she wasn't watching the weather. Everything my father built, everything I protected, all of it treated like a prize to be stolen. I pulled over at a gas station outside the city and sat there with the engine running, hands locked on the steering wheel. I'd always thought danger looked obvious: drought, disease, a bad market year. I never imagined it would wear a white dress and smile at my son. Rage rose up, hot and bitter. Then it settled into something colder. Resolve. Because anger burns fast. Resolve endures. I thought about Christopher, not just the man he'd become, but the boy who used to fall asleep in the truck after long days fixing fence, his boots dangling off the seat. He hadn't failed me. He'd seen the truth. He'd moved first. He'd protected us both. By the time I finally turned the car back toward the hotel, the sun was low and the sky stretched wide and honest again. I whispered my wife's name, not as a plea, but as a promise. "We're still here," I said, "and we're not losing this." If you've ever had a moment where fear turned into clarity, where you stopped shaking and started standing, stay with me. Because the next morning would test whether I meant it. Morning came too fast. I dressed slowly in the hotel room, button by button, like I was putting on armor instead of a suit. The fabric felt stiff against my skin, not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. I'd worn it once before, back when I still believed this wedding was real. I checked myself in the mirror. Same face, same lines, same hands. But my eyes had changed. They held something new now. Not anger, not fear, knowledge. In the lobby, Christopher was already waiting, calm, centered. He looked at me the way a man looks at someone he trusts not to break when things turn heavy. "You okay?" he asked. I answered honestly, "No, but I'm ready." That was enough. The drive to the venue passed in silence. Not awkward silence, focused silence. The kind two men share when words would only get in the way. When we arrived, the place looked exactly like Amanda had imagined. White stone walls, tall glass doors, flowers everywhere, perfect, expensive, carefully arranged to look effortless. Staff moved quickly, smiling, adjusting details no one would notice unless something went wrong. I noticed the screen behind the altar immediately. Large, bright, silent. To everyone else, it was decoration. To me, it looked like a loaded trap. As we took our seats in the front row, I felt eyes on me again. Curious glances. Recognition. A few people remembered the insult from the engagement party. They were wondering if I'd still be standing when the music stopped. I folded my hands together and stared straight ahead. If you've ever walked into a room knowing the truth was about to detonate and all you had to do was stay steady, then you know exactly how that moment felt. And once the ceremony started, there would be no turning back. The ceremony began right on time. Soft music filled the room, carefully chosen to make people feel something without asking why. Guests stood as one, turning toward the back doors. That's when Amanda appeared. She looked exactly the way magazines promise happiness should look. White dress, perfect posture, a smile practiced just enough to feel real from a distance. Her father walked beside her, chin high, eyes scanning the room like a man inspecting a deal he already expected to close. People sighed. A few dabbed their eyes. Someone whispered, "She's beautiful." I stayed seated, not out of disrespect, but because standing felt like pretending. Amanda's gaze swept the front row and landed on me for half a second. The smile on her face tightened, just barely before she looked away. "Good." Christopher stood at the altar, hands folded, expression calm. When he looked at her, there was no nervousness there. No softness either. Just focus. That should have warned her. The officiant spoke about love, about partnership, about trust. Each word felt heavier than the last, like it was stacking up, waiting for gravity to take over. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. "Christopher Walker," the officiant said, "do you take Amanda Winslow to be your lawful wife?" Christopher raised his hand. "Before I answer," he said clearly, his voice steady enough to carry to every corner of the room, "there's something everyone here needs to hear." The music stopped. Amanda turned toward him, confusion flickering across her face. And somewhere behind us, the screen began to hum. If you've ever felt that second right before a lie collapses, hold on. Because this was the moment everything changed. The screen behind the altar flickered once, then lit up. Amanda's head snapped toward it. "What is this?" she hissed, her smile cracking at the edges. Christopher didn't look at her. He looked at the room. "You all deserve the truth," he said. especially my family. The first voice that came through the speakers wasn't angry. It was relaxed, almost amused. Amanda's voice. "I'm not marrying him for love," she laughed. "I'm marrying him for the land." The room didn't gasp all at once. It froze, like every spine locked at the same time. Amanda took a step forward. "That's fake," she said too quickly. "This is edited. Turn it off." But the audio kept going. Her father's voice followed, smooth, confident, certain. "The interstate expansion is approved. Once construction starts, the property value jumps. 25 million, easily." Chairs scraped as people stood without realizing they were doing it. Phones came out not because people understood yet, but because instinct told them something irreversible was happening. Amanda grabbed Christopher's arm. "Turn it off," she whispered, panic breaking through. "Now." He didn't flinch. He didn't look at her. He looked straight ahead like a man finally setting something heavy down after carrying it too long. The recordings continued. Dates, numbers, plans. Each word stripped another layer off the lie. And by the time the audio stopped, no one in that room was breathing the same way they had 10 minutes earlier. If you've ever watched the truth arrive without raising its voice, you know how loud silence can be. Amanda tried to laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because laughter had always worked before. "This is ridiculous," she said, turning toward the guests, voice pitched too high. "Anyone can fake audio these days. He's trying to humiliate me." Her words echoed back thin and brittle. No one laughed with her. People weren't looking at Christopher anymore. They were looking at her. At her father, at the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes darted toward the exits like a man calculating losses. Then Richard moved. He stepped quickly toward the side of the stage where the technicians should have been, calm at first, then faster. "Turn it off," he snapped. Now, nothing happened. The screen went dark, but the damage was already done. Silence pressed down on the room, heavier than the audio ever had been. Phones were up everywhere now, because people don't wait to understand anymore. They record first. Amanda's control shattered. "You set me up," she screamed at Christopher. "You ruined my life." Christopher finally turned to her. His voice was steady, almost tired. "No," he said. "You told the truth. We just let people hear it." That was the moment the room understood something important. This wasn't drama. It was consequence. And consequences don't negotiate. The side doors opened without ceremony. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, calm, deliberate, like men who already knew exactly where they were going. The shift in the room was instant. Whispers died. Phones lowered just enough to make space for reality. A man in a plain suit stood from the 3rd row and raised a badge. "Mark Reynolds," he said evenly. "Assistant District Attorney. No shouting. No theatrics." He explained what the recordings represented: conspiracy, attempted fraud, forged documents already in motion. He spoke the way people do when the facts are heavy enough to carry themselves. Amanda shook her head, whispering no, like repetition might undo the truth. Richard took a step back, then another. The officers moved in. Handcuffs clicked soft, final. Amanda's knees gave out. Her white dress folded beneath her like a lie collapsing under its own weight. She sobbed, reaching for Christopher, for anyone. No one moved, because this wasn't entertainment anymore. It was consequence. As they were led down the aisle, the same one she'd walked minutes earlier, believing everything was hers, people leaned away. Not out of cruelty, out of instinct. I stayed seated, hands folded, eyes forward. For the first time since that insult, the power in the room had shifted. And it wasn't coming back. They were gone within minutes. The doors closed behind them with a sound that echoed longer than it should have. Finale. Christopher sat beside me, shoulders lowering like he'd finally set something heavy down. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. I placed my hand on his back. He didn't pull away. Around us, people whispered, recalculating who they'd believed, who they'd ignored, who they'd nearly watched get erased politely. A woman across the aisle met my eyes and nodded once. Respect, not pity. And that mattered, because the thing they tried to take from me wasn't the land. It was my place, and I was still sitting in it. Life didn't turn cinematic after that day. There was no music swelling, no victory speeches, no feeling of winning. There was just work. The ranch didn't care about courtrooms or ballrooms. Fences still leaned. Vines still needed trimming. Sunrises still arrived early and without apology. And somehow, that was exactly what healed us. Christopher stayed. At first, just longer than planned, then longer still. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills and the air smelled like dust and grapes and memory, he said quietly, "I don't think I need the city anymore." I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. We worked side by side again, not trying to reclaim anything, not proving anything, just continuing what had always mattered. And that's when I understood something it took me a lifetime to learn. A legacy isn't land. It isn't money. It isn't even survival. It's the people who choose truth over comfort, who protect what's real instead of what looks impressive, who stay steady when it would be easier to walk away. Sometimes I think back to that ballroom, to the laugh meant to shrink me, the stinky country boy. If that means building something with your hands, standing quietly when tested, and raising a son who knows the difference between patience and weakness, then I'll take that name, proudly. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of a moment where dignity mattered more than winning, I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. Tell me what part hit you hardest. Tell me where you're listening from. And if stories like this speak to you, I invite you to explore the others on this channel. They're not about shouting. They're about endurance. Because the strongest stories don't demand attention. They earn it.